Previously, I created a useful video which you can click here, where an Excel dashboard user can click a single button and that'll clear all the slicer filters in one go to save time without clearing them individually. Well, following from that, I've made this video which extends the functionality of that button so that it is dynamic. So whenever a filter selection is made, it changes the color of the button from the default gray to a green button. And that's going to indicate to the user that a slicer filter has been made. And when you clear the slicer filters, then it changes it back to a default gray. Let's see how it's done, and you can also download the full Excel dashboard from the link in the description. So we've got the same dashboard as before, as in the previous video, but this time we don't have the clear or slicer button. So as before, we go into the Excel developer menu, we click on insert. Now for the first dashboard for the previous video, I used a button from the forms control menu, but for the dynamic button, we're going to be using a command button from the ActiveX controls menu. Click on that and then place it and resize it over the area of the dashboard where you want it to appear, and then right click and click on properties. Now you don't get these as menu options for form controls, only for ActiveX controls. Click on properties, and here you get exposed all the properties relating to this particular ActiveX control, which is the command button. The first property we want to change the default name from command button 1 to this name, command clear slices dynamic color button, and we're going to be referring to this name in the VBA code, which I'll be explaining to you later. The next property we want to change is the caption. We'll put this as clear or filters. And lastly, what we want to do is we want to change the font size. Click on the font and we want to change it to font size 12. And then close the properties window. And so yeah, you've got the button all set up on your dashboard, and it's going to be an ActiveX control. And the next part is to program it under this button. Okay, so now that we've got the command button set up, which is an ActiveX control, we need to program it using VBA. So we need to open up the Excel VBA editor. There's two ways to do this. You either go into the Excel developer menu and click on Visual Basic right on the far left, or on your keyboard press Alt F11. I'm going to click the button. It opens up the Excel VBA editor. Now you got all your objects relating to your workbook, and you can just right click on any one of these and click on Insert Module, and that opens up creates a standard module. I've got the code already set up. Two subroutines, the VBA subroutines I need to go through. The first one clears all the slices, and there's also a new part which I'll go through. So as before, the first part, it switches off screen updating for improved performance. Part here. Next part, it declares a variable called cache, and it's going to be of type slicer cache. And next part, it cycles through all of the caches in the active workbook slicer caches and looks at each of the caches of type slicer cache, and then clears the manual filter which relates to any slicer filters applied. So this part here, a loop. Next part here is purely optional. You don't need to do this. All it does is select the cell D20. So once all the slices are cleared, it sits behind the selected active cell, sits behind a slicer so you don't see it, just to make it look neater. It's purely optional and you don't need to do it, and you can take this part out if you want to. The next part is a new part, and what that does is the command button which we created earlier has this name here, command clear slicer dynamic color button. Now this button is created in sheet 2. So the code name for the dashboard sheet is sheet 2. Now if I press, when you type sheet 2 and then press dot, it shows all of the objects that are on that sheet, and one of them is the one that we created, and that's the command button. That's command clear slicer dynamic color button. So IntelliSense shows it for you, then you select it, and then the next part is the property. Now the command button has a property, and it has many properties, and one of them is the back color. There's all these other things as well, like you got auto resize, auto load, you got backside, you got border, but the one we want is back color. And we use that property, and we're going to change the property of that to the color of the back color, the background, to a standard gray button face color. And then we use this the RGB format for the coloring. And for standard gray color, it's 192.192.192. And the last part, it switches back on screen updating. The next routine is called check slicer filter status adjust button background color. This routine uses a loop to check to see if any slice has been filtered, and if it does detect a filter has been applied, it changes the button color to green. And if the loop shows no slice has been filtered, it changes the button color to default gray. First part, as before, it switches off screen updating. The next part, it declares a, just as before, a variable cache, a slicer cache. This part here, it declares a Boolean variable called BLN slicer filter applied and set that as false. And that flag is going to be used to flag if a filter has been applied. So it's been initialized as false, and if it does detect a slicer that's been filtered, then it changes it from false to true. I'll show you later. This part here is a for loop similar to one before. It goes through each cache in the active workbook slicer caches, and then what the this part does, the if block does, is it checks to see if the filter cleared property of the cache is false or true. Now, if it's true, that means the property filter cleared is true. That means the filter's been cleared. But if it's false, that means the filter hasn't been cleared. And if that's the case, it changes the Boolean variable BLN slicer filter applied from false to true. And that is an indicating a flag that now it detects a filter has been applied. And that's all we need to know uh, to change the button color. We don't need to then go through the rest of the slicer caches. Then we can exit the for loop and also exit the block as well. Now that we have a value, a confirmed value for the Boolean variable, it uses a select case. So if it's true, that means the slicer filter has been detected, so it changes the button color to green as before. And this time the RGB format is this format here. And the next part of the select statement, if the Boolean variable is false, that means no, which is default, the initial value, that means no filter has been detected. And then it changes the color to default gray. The last part, it switches back on screen updating. Your next step is to go back to your Excel dashboard containing your command button, and you have to make sure on the Excel developer menu the design mode button is switched on. And on the command button, right click and select view code. Excel creates a event code for the click event for the button, and then we can put any program that we want. And so for the click event, it'll respond to any programming that we put under this in this shell code. If you go back to the module, and if you click on the second drop down, you have a list of all your VBA routine which you created. The one that we're interested for the button is this one here, the first one. Clear all workbook slicer filter dynamic color. So that is the VBA macro which clears all the slicer filters and changes the background color of the button to gray. Copy that, go back to sheet 2 in the shell code for the click event, and we call that subroutine. Next thing we do is while we're still here, we click on the first drop down and we click on worksheet, and this is the default event selection change event which we don't need to use. Go to the second drop down, the one we need is called pivot table update. So we're going to be using this one. You can clear the other one, delete the other one. So the reason we're going to be using this event is every time a slice is being selected, we want to change the color of the button green. So if you go back to the module one again, the other macro which I created was this one. Clear check slicer filter status adjust button background color. So this is the one that changes the background of the button. So we copy this, go back to sheet 2 on the VB editor, and then we're going to call this pivot table update event. So that's all done. All the VBA coding has been done. Now let's see in action. Finally, going back to the dashboard, we need to do is we need to switch off design mode. That's going to enable the command button. And let's make some selections. So we'll go for California. And as you can see, when you make a selection, the button color changes to green. And that's a visual indication to the user that a filter, at least one filter is applied. Now let's clear it using this button. So we're going to clear the filter. It changes it to the default gray. I hope you enjoyed this video and stay tuned for my next video.